Welcome to another episode of Break Away from the Rat Race, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Patrick Elsner, a leading franchise consultant. He brings 20 years of experience in helping corporate executive and aspiring franchise owners achieve their dreams. His proven process has successfully launched over 500 franchises through his free matching service. With a focus on financial freedom and escaping corporate monotony, Patrick combines empathy, insight, and logic to guide individuals toward intelligent decisions and successful business venture. Patrick, welcome to the show. I understand you're also going to have an offer at the end of this show, so make sure you stay on. Patrick, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I appreciate you having me.
So let's get started here. So why should people look at franchise opportunities? Why is this a viable business model that people should be interested in?
Yeah, I think the biggest draw to a franchise is the systems and infrastructure. A lot of people, say, I don't have an idea, Patrick. I don't have an idea on what the business should be. So with a franchise, it's a ready-made business model, and it's really all about execution. It's like buying furniture at IKEA and then reading the instruction manual and putting that furniture together. Hopefully you don't end up with any wobbly legs though.
Yeah. So, or extra parts and stuff like that. So, all right. So yeah, I mean, that's true. A lot of people, they want to start a business and then they may even have an idea, but then when you get started and you just have an idea, you have to define your market, you have to define your processes, you have to define a lot of things that people sometimes don't realize they have to do. So a lot of work to get this ramped up, and a franchise would basically get all of that cleared away. You have something that is already working in multiple locations, hopefully across the country, and it is already, you already know it's a proven system, process, and business model.
Yeah, you're really getting a business in a box is the best way to describe it. If I were going to start a plumbing business, I'd have to come up with the logo, the website, the marketing strategy. I'd have to write operation manuals. I'd have to go out and hire. I'd have to learn about plumbing and P-traps and all that stuff. So it's the difference between, a guy who typically looks to me to join a franchise is usually a corporate American executive in his 40s or early 50s. He doesn't have the learning curve. He doesn't have the time horizon he did, say, at 25. So there's another benefit in that franchise. I just interviewed a guy today, and same thing. He said it's the blueprint, Patrick. It's the whole idea of having the systems in place that give him confidence and help erase that fear.
Yeah, and I think there's two reasons that I can come up with, and maybe you have reasons also, that since you've talked to so many investors, but I think the number one is that it costs a lot of money to buy the franchise. This is a lot of money. I'd rather kind of like start and do it myself instead of paying huge franchise fee and and kind of like wasting that money away. So what do you say to that?
Yeah, look, what I always tell people is this, Eric, it comes down to the value. Sometimes I get pushback from somebody. They say, Patrick, I don't want to pay those royalties. I don't want to pay those fees. I'm like, well, I don't want to pay taxes either, but when my house catches on fire, I'm sure glad that there's somebody that's going to come and put it out. So those fees that you're paying, Eric, it's just like, is there value? One of the brands I represent has a call center that actually sets up appointments with customers. Now, there's got to be some value in that. I mean, can you imagine building your own call center and implementing that versus paying, I don't know, 5-6% of your gross sales every month? There's huge upside to that.
Yeah, and also a lot of them, they have a brand recognition. That if you want to get like a carpet cleaner or something like that, then are you going to go with John's carpet cleaner, or are you going to go with like a brand name that you recognize and trust, that you've seen on TV and all of that?
Yeah, look, I can argue both sides of it. There are people that will say, Patrick, I don't want to spend my money with Stanley Steamer carpet cleaner. I want to work with John's carpet because I know John. I go to church with him. If there's any problem, I'll see John at church. He'll take care of it. And then there are other people that say, well, I don't know who John is, but I know who Stanley Steamer is. I see national TV ads for Stanley Steamer. So I have a level of trust that's in that. Again, there's no right way or wrong way to view this. And franchising isn't perfect. It's not for everybody. And I've told people this. I said, you don't strike me as a franchise guy. And they go, well, why do you say that, Patrick? I go, well, because you strike me as a guy who's a little more independent, maybe has that ability to do things that other people don't. One's not right, one's not wrong.
Another objection that I can come up with is that, I don't want to be hands-on. If I get a Subway franchise, I don't want to have to make sandwiches. I'm an executive. I used to be in corporate America. I don't want to start making sandwiches, for people. That's not my thing. Or I don't want to work at what's the other one with anyway never mind. So yeah. So what do you say to that? What's the answer to that?
Yeah, there is no way you're going to scale any business up, Eric, if you're the chief cook and bottle washer. I don't care if it's a Subway. My brother used to own a little deli. I mean, he couldn't run it by himself. You have to have other people involved in your operation. Otherwise, you're just buying yourself a job. And there's no reason to do that. You don't want to buy yourself a job, because I've heard that as a criticism. People say, oh, Patrick, franchising, that's just buying a job. That is a dim-witted statement from somebody who lacks knowledge and understanding of how franchising works. There's a guy here in St. Louis, Eric, that owns 120 Great Clips hair salons. I don't think he's working in those salons. He's built an empire, a huge apparatus.
He's going to be very busy.
It'll be like Edward Scissorhands.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So any kind of other objections that people have why they don't want to go into the franchise business?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is rigidity. They feel like they're lacking control. They're giving up, some level of autonomy. And all those things, by the way, are 100% true. I mean, if you open up a McDonald's, you couldn't say, oh, well, it's Fridays here in Boston, we should sell sushi because we've got a lot of Catholics here.
Yeah.
Okay, conceptually, I get it, but that's not how a franchise works. You're coloring within the lines. Now, there are outlets for creativity within a franchise system. You could do local marketing, you could do local sponsorships. There are ways to do things locally that still give it a sort of local flair. But yeah, the reason you're joining a franchise is for the uniformity. I don't know how long to fry a patty at a McDonald's, but I'm sure they would train me how to do that.
Yeah.
That's the reason people are joining.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're joining a football club, a football team, and they have playbooks, plays. Right. So you do this, you do that, and and this is it. The reason you joined that football team is because they were successful in what they were doing, and they're going to tell you what plays in their playbooks were successful, and you just follow it, and you're going to be successful too.
Yeah, can you imagine the Packers without a playbook? I mean, that would just be chaos on the field.
Exactly. So, all right. So you've have me sold on the franchise business. I think this is something that I'm interested in. I want to look into that. And then I started looking for a franchise. I mean, where do I go? And then when I find that, I find thousands and thousands and thousands of franchise opportunities. Unbelievable. How do I sort through all this?
Yeah, the biggest challenge for a lot of people, and that's a common lament that I hear from people, Eric, they'll say, my gosh, I was on, Entrepreneur magazine, and there's, thousands of franchises. I always tell people, think about shopping for a home. You're not going to go out and randomly go into random open houses. It just doesn't make any sense. But you'd sit down with a realtor and say, okay, realtor, I've got 2 daughters, a wife, we want a pool, so we want, at least a 4-bedroom house. We want 3 garage. We want a pool. Our budget is X. We want school districts. We want to be more urban. Now you've given the real estate agent a set of criteria. So when I work with somebody, Eric, I have them fill out a questionnaire. I do about a 45-minute interview. Then I come back and say, all right, here are specific franchises based upon your criteria that are available where you live. And that's how we get to that point of suggesting specific brands.
Is that a process that you have that kind of like takes the people narrow down exactly what franchise? Is that what your process is about?
Yeah, it's all about taking 5 minutes, filling out a pretty simple questionnaire, basic stuff. And then the substance comes when I interview them, because always when I interview somebody, there's a lot of aha moments. Wow, Patrick, I never thought about that. That's a great question. And it really makes them think about criteria, because so many people come to me and they'll say, Patrick, I think I want to own a Jimmy John's. And I go, why is that? Well, I was there today at lunch and boy, that food is great. There's a line out the door and everybody's got to eat, right? And I say, well, okay, well, do you know if you qualify for a Jimmy John's? Do you know if they're even available in, Poughkeepsie? Oh, I don't know that. That's why I always say, set the franchises aside. Let's criteria, figure out what's available where you live.
Yeah. So what's the number one criteria? When I invest a lot in real estate and for rental real estate, so I'm looking for landlord friendly states. I'm looking for places where there's a lot of tenants, and then where the house affordability. I'm looking at income. I'm looking at house prices and all that kind of stuff, and rental. So what are some of the criteria? How do you narrow down? What are the criteria for narrowing down the franchises?
Yeah, the number one reason businesses fail, and this is universal, not just to franchising, Eric, the number one reason businesses fail is undercapitalization. And you see this often. A business might open up, maybe they're there for 6 months or a year, and all of a sudden the lights go dark. I will bet you 9 out of 10 times they ran out of money. So that's why we don't go, it's like real estate. We don't look at $1 million homes if our budget's $250. Yeah. We're going to figure out what's in the financial wheelhouse. That's the biggest thing. Second thing, we've got to find something that plays to your professional strengths. There's a book called Now Discover Your Strengths. It talks about you can't teach a rabbit to swim, you can't teach a turtle to hop. So you want to place to your professional strengths. And those are probably the 2 pillars of the selection process.
Yeah. So when you're looking at the franchise industry today, there's a lot of, the economy is going in all kinds of weird directions right now. Where do you think, which industry do you think has the most promises?
Well, there's a lot of factors that will come into that answer. The biggest thing is I prefer non-food franchises that are not food related. Now, that'll run counter to conventional wisdom, right? They always say, well, Patrick, during, trying economic times, no matter what, people have to eat. Yes, that is true. But the money, like my Scottish buddy says, he says the money is in muck. Dull, boring businesses are the way to go. Now, I'll give you a specific example. I placed a guy into a restoration franchise called Paul Davis Restoration. You may not know that name, but most people recognize Servpro.
Oh, yeah.
This is a dull, boring business. When you got a foot of water in your basement, you're going to get that taken care of. And so these safe, dull, boring businesses, they're not sexy, they're not interesting. It's not like owning a coffee shop or a restaurant, but they're safe.
Yeah, especially I live in Miami area, Fort Lauderdale, and yeah, we do have some water issues here when it's hurricane season is approaching. So we're expecting some kind of flooding for some houses, and I'm sure there's going to be a ton of roofing issues, restoration issues, and flooding issues that's going to have to be resolved. So and that happens every year. So it's a good business.
Oh yeah, you can set your watch by it, Eric.
Yeah. So any other, so all the mocks, so yeah, the restoration, any other ones around that another type of industry that's also kind of like in the boring kind of thing that is also highly profitable?
Yeah, there are a couple of other pillars. I like the pet space.
Okay.
If you think about today's generation, my daughters, they're not having kids, they're having pets. So people will spend an obscene amount of money on their furry little friends. And you look what happened with COVID. You heard of the COVID puppy. Now people are going back to work, going back to the office, or they're saying, what am I going to do with this puppy here? It's no
Yeah.
longer a puppy. So anything in the pet space, there's definitely an opportunity there. Also with kids, we as parents, and I'm guilty of this, we spend a lot of money on our kids, whether it's education, social, birthday parties, sports. We'll spend money on our kids. So those
Yeah.
are a couple of categories I look at.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. So would you so I'm interested in these categories. I agree with you. I prefer the boring stuff. And so what would you do? Like I'm in Miami, let's say, and so do I look for space like franchise opportunity in the pet and restoration business in my area, or can I do that outside with like and have management do it, or how would you recommend you approach this?
Yeah, I had this come up earlier today with a gentleman who lives in Chicago and was asking me that same question. I recommend if it's your first business, Eric, start with a business that you can drive by every day. If when you get your sea legs, when you get your confidence and you shorten that learning curve, like the gentleman that I mentioned earlier that owns 120 Great Clips,
Yeah.
that's fine. He can own Great Clips in Hawaii, Alaska, New York, LA. Doesn't really matter
Yeah.
because he knows how to execute that business. But
Yeah.
generally, for your first business, you want it to be in your area.
Hmm. Yeah, especially you can also look at numbers. You can see you can see signs that something is wrong.
Right.
If you've done 150 of these businesses, you see, oh, how come there's not that many appointments on Mondays or something like that. Then you say, okay, well, something wrong here. Like normally all my other stores they're full on Monday or whatever. So yeah, you can definitely see some signs because you have the experience of looking at that same franchise. And actually, that's a good question too. Is should you concentrate your franchise? So should you go do more and more, go deep in one particular franchise, or should you diversify in multiple franchises? Or if it's both, like at which point do you diversify? Do you wait until you have 3 or 4 and then move on, or how do you do that?
Yeah. So again, many factors are involved, and all ultimately depends on the end result. Like I placed a lady in Supercuts in Dallas. She's got like 30 stores now. Now there are other people that may own, 25 Supercuts and 10 KFCs. I mean, you think about Sean Toohey from the movie From the Blind Side, it was played by Tim McGraw. Now Sean owned a bunch of different restaurants, Long John Silver's, A&W's, Taco Bell's. I'm not sure what QSR, quick serve restaurants he owned, but he was diversified, but in the food space.
Same industry.
Certainly, somebody can make an argument to say, okay, I want some in food, some in auto, some in pets, some in home care. A lot of it just depends upon a number of variables.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what's the protection that you have as a franchisee? So you buy into the franchise, and then you have the money. They tell you that, oh, you need this much money, you need this much money for operations for the first 3 or 4 months and all that kind of stuff. So what's the protection that I get that this is going to work? Then if it doesn't work, what happens? Do I just lose my money and then nobody's responsible for anything? How does that work? What's the kind of like the balance of responsibility in the risk?
Yeah. Well, the Federal Trade Commission has an extremely tight clamp on the franchise industry. It's probably more regulated than financial services. And a lot of that is designed to protect the consumer from unscrupulous players. Look, every industry has its bad actors. I don't care if you're talking about franchising, Catholic priests, financial services. You're always going to have predators.
Yeah.
The difference with the franchise model is this: if you get into the right franchise that plays to your strengths, that fits your financial profile, you've got a fighting chance of being successful. It's not guaranteed, but you've got a fighting chance. The biggest benefit of the research part is when you're researching a franchise, Eric, you got to pick up the phone and you can talk to franchise owners nationwide and you can ask them, hey, I'm thinking about opening up a Meineke. How's your experience been operating a Meineke? They're going to tell you, here's what's great, here's what stinks, and everywhere in between.
Yeah, yeah. So you have to do your due diligence and your research before you kind of like dive.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of these franchisors, I mean, they're more than willing to share with you kind of like information about who you want to talk to, kind of like reference calls and stuff like that to put your mind at ease, right?
Absolutely. You want to learn about the model. You want to talk to the franchise or learn about the model. That way, when you do talk to franchisees, you're equipped with the right questions to ask. Just like if I decided I wanted to investigate McDonald's, I wouldn't just reach out to the franchise owners. I want to learn from McDonald's, what are they exactly offering? Then I would go and talk to the franchise owners and hear what they say. It's kind of like what Ronald Reagan says, trust but verify.
Yeah.
It's the same thing here.
Yeah.
I'll trust what you say, but I'm going to verify with the individual franchise owners.
Yeah, even if the FTC is looking at these documents, because I think in these franchise documents, I mean, they do make some claims around the projections for how much revenue they think you can make on a particular franchise and all that kind of stuff. It's verified by the FTC, but you really have to kind of like dig a little bit, make sure that these numbers are correct and all that kind of stuff, right?
Absolutely. And again, there are bad actors in franchising. There are great brands, and there's everything in between.
Yeah.
You are still
on Wall Street as well. So
yeah, again, it doesn't matter. You can pick up any industry and you can find that. The key to the whole thing is you have to do your homework. The Federal Trade Commission is designed, they've got the guardrails in place. If you stay within the framework, doesn't mean it's an absolute, but at least you can mitigate your risk.
Yeah. So what are some of the financial requirements to be a franchisee? Do you need to be an accredited investor? Do you need to have a special, anything special, credit score or amount of money?
Yeah, there are two numbers that a franchise brand looks at to qualify. Number one is your cash liquidity, the cash injection, whether you are doing an SBA loan or using your retirement funds to tap into that. But the cash availability is number one. The other big factor, Eric, is your net worth. So you have to have a certain net worth to qualify. And I think that really sometimes is a little bit of a head scratcher for people that I work with. They'll say, well, I don't understand. You're saying I don't qualify for a Jimmy John's. And I said, well, Jimmy John's requires a net worth of, say, $750,000. And they're like, you're kidding me. Why is it that high? Well, again, it goes back to what I said earlier about failures. I mean, think about Panera Bread. Panera Bread won't even talk to you if you don't have a $7 million net worth, $3 million in liquidity, and oh, by the way, you better have 10 years of restaurant operation experience.
Oh, wow.
The funny thing is, I don't know too many people that have worked in the restaurant business that really end up having two nickels to rub together. So it's an extremely picky candidate they're looking for at Panera Bread.
Yeah, wow, this is amazing. So Patrick, you mentioned that you had like a special offer for our listeners. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, they can go to franinside.com. So FRAN inside.com/breakaway. And they can access my 22-page guide on how to conduct a franchise investigation. So franinside.com/breakaway, or they can also go to that same link. And if they want to book 10 or 15 minutes with me, just to have a conversation, happy to do that as well. No cost, no obligation.
Excellent. And do you represent specific franchisors, or you just helping as a consultant? How does that work specifically?
Yeah. So I have a stable of brands that I represent, but given the nature of franchise licenses, Eric, once the franchise awards all the territories in a given city, that franchise is no longer available. And this is another one that's kind of a head scratcher for a lot of people. They'll say, Patrick, I'm interested in crumble cookies. And I say, well, it's not available. Well, but there isn't one on Watson Road. I say, well, doesn't matter if there's one on Watson Road or not. Somebody owns the territory rights. They're going to eventually probably open one on Watson Road. That's why it's important to focus and work with a consultant, because I'm going to be able to, as an insider, figure out what's available where you live, but more importantly, what you qualify for.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So so the link is franinside.com/breakaway to book 15 minutes with Patrick, special free consultation, as well as getting his 22-page guide on franchises and how to do an investigation, financial investigation into franchises. Patrick, any other ways for people to reach out to you or see anything else that you have?
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel. You can just put Patrick Elsner in the search bar. I've got 15 one-minute videos that'll tell you a whole lot more. They can also look me up on LinkedIn. I've been doing this for 20 years. There's over 100 written testimonials, people I placed just in the last couple of years. So check me out on LinkedIn. You'll see all that information. And I'm the top 1% of all consultants in the country that do what I do. And I always tell people, I'm not saying that to impress you. I'm simply saying that to make an impression on you. You're not working with some rookie. As they say in Texas, it's not my first rodeo.
Yeah, very good. Patrick, it was a pleasure speaking with you, and good luck.
Thanks, Eric.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Break Away from the Rat Race with your host, Eric Martel. If you want to share your story and experience with our listeners, please message us on Facebook at Break Away from the Rat Race. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast on iTunes.